She showed up on a Tuesday. I remember that because Tuesdays were resupply days at COS 11, which meant the docking bay was loud, with cargo loaders and the Canteen line stretched past the water station, and I was already behind before the breakfast shift started. The station manager, Harrick, brought her to the service window and said she had transit papers and was looking for work. Kitchen, cleaning, general labor, she would take anything. I looked up from the fryer grate and saw a woman standing very still of a room full of people who were not still at all. She was alien, that was obvious. Warm bronze-brown skin with a faint metallic quality to it, the kind that catches overhead light and holds it for a half-second too long. Dark hair, almost black, but with a deep teal undertone that showed when she turned her head. Dark amber eyes, pointed ears, though she kept her hair forward to cover them. She was thin, not frail, composed, standing the way a person stands when they have decided exactly how much space they are willing to take up and will not be moved from it. Harrick told me her name was Tivayan. Said she could start that morning if I had a slot. I had a slot. I always had a slot. COS 11 was a relay station on a secondary transit corridor between the Verith cluster and the outer trade lanes. Nobody came to COS 11 because they wanted to. People came because their ship needed a coolant cycle, or their cargo manifest had a flag, or they were running out of fuel, and we were the last station before the gap. We had 84 permanent residents, a rotating population of transients, a canteen that served 3 meals a day, and a chronic shortage of anyone willing to scrub the grill trays. I told Harrick she could start. She started. That first morning she stood at the prep station and watched me portion the protein trays for 10 minutes without speaking. Then she picked up the rotation pattern, portioning, stacking, loading the warmer, and did it faster and more evenly than I did. No questions, no hesitation. She moved through the kitchen, the way water moves through a channel it has already carved, and I stood there, watching this woman who had walked in off a transit shuttle and was somehow running my prep line like she had designed it. I should have noticed then. I did not. That was 2 years ago. I want to be clear about something. I did not know. I want that understood from the beginning, because what happened later made people assume I had figured it out, that I had seen through some disguise or recognized some tell or had some deep human intuition about who she really was. I did not. I am a canteen operator on a relay station. I am not perceptive. I am not clever. I wipe down counters and portion freeze-dried protein into trays and fix the water recycler when it stalls, which is often. My name is Darren Cool. I have worked COS 11 for 11 years. I am not the kind of man things happen to. But I will tell you what I did do, because apparently it mattered. I used her name. That sounds like nothing. I understand that. But COSist runs on badge numbers. The station's personnel system assigns a 4-digit code when you register for work, and that code goes on your meal voucher, your bunk assignment, your shift rotation, your maintenance log. Tivan's was 4712. The other kitchen staff called her that, or called her nothing. The transient freighter crews who came through the canteen line called her nothing. Harrick called her the new one for 6 months and then just stopped referring to her at all. I called her Tivayan. Not because I am a good man. I want to be clear about that, too. I called her Tivayan because my mother called people by their names, and my mother's habits are in my hands like muscle memory. When someone tells you their name, you use it. That is not virtue. That is just what my mother did, and I am my mother's son, and some things do not require a reason. So every morning when Tivayan came in for the early shift, I said, "Morning, Tivayan," and every evening when she finished the last scrub down, I said, "Night, Tivan." And in between, when I needed the prep trays rotated or the cold store inventory checked, I said, "Tivan, could you?" instead of "Hey" or "4712" or nothing at all. I also saved her a plate. This requires slightly more explanation. The canteen served 3 meals a day to everyone on the station and anyone passing through. Breakfast was the big one. Freighter crews coming off overnight coolant cycles, maintenance teams starting shift, the handful of permanent residents who had nowhere else to be. The line started at 0600 and ran until 0800, and by the end of it, the serving trays looked like something had dragged its way across them. Lunch was lighter. Dinner was whatever I could stretch from the day's allocation, which was never quite enough and never quite varied enough, and was the subject of more complaints than any other aspect of life on COS 11, including the water pressure. But the kitchen staff ate last, after the line closed, and by then the trays were scraped and the good portions were gone. What remained was the stuck residue at the bottom of the warming pans and the pieces no one had wanted, the over-dried edges, the burnt corners, the portions that had sat too long under the heat lamp and turned to something that was technically edible and spiritually defeated. Tivain never complained about this. She ate what was left without comment, standing by the service window, looking out at the empty canteen with that same composed stillness she had brought with her on the first day. She ate the way a person eats when they have decided that food is fuel and nothing more, and that the quality of fuel is not worth remarking on. After about 2 weeks, I started setting a plate aside before the line opened. Nothing special, the same protein portion and starch and rehydrated greens everyone else got, just set on the warmer shelf behind the fryer station where it would not be picked over. When the line closed, I put it on the counter where she could reach it. She looked at me the first time I did it. Not surprised, exactly. More like she was running a calculation she had not expected to need. She picked up the plate, ate standing at the window, and said nothing. This went on for 2 years. I learned things about her in that time, not because she told me. Tivain did not volunteer information the way most people do, dropping facts about themselves like loose coins. Everything I learned by watching, and I want to be honest. I was not watching because I suspected anything. I was watching because I work a canteen counter 14 hours a day, and there is not much else to look at. She knew things. Small things at first. The inventory system we used was a standard Verith cluster commercial platform, and on her third day, Tivain reorganized the cold store tags into a classification scheme I did not recognize. It took me 20 minutes to realize it was a military logistics format. Fleet-grade supply chain coding, the kind used on carrier vessels, not relay station kitchens. I asked her about it. She said she had seen it somewhere. I let it go. She knew the docking protocols. When a vessel came in on approach, the canteen got a ping from the bay controller with the ship's registry and crew. Complement so I could estimate the meal count. Tivain glanced at those pings. Once, a Verith heavy freighter came in flagged as a standard cargo hauler, and Tivain looked at the registry code and said, quietly, without looking up from the tray she was scrubbing, "That is a converted military transport. The crew complement will be higher than listed. You should double the protein allocation." She was right. The crew complement was almost triple what the ping showed. I would have run out of food halfway through the line if I had not listened to her. I did not ask how she knew. There were other things, small, accumulating things that I filed away without examining, because examining them would have meant asking questions, and asking questions would have meant she might stop up answering. She could read the trade lane schedules before they posted. Not guess, read them, the way a person reads a report they helped write. She knew which supply allocations would be shorted before the manifest came through. She once told me to double order the medical-grade saline packs 3 weeks before a transit accident in the Northern Corridor sent 46 casualties to the nearest stations for triage, and COS 11 was one of 3 with sufficient supply, because I had listened to her and could not explain why. She fixed the water recycler. I need to say this plainly because it matters. The recycler had stalled every 3rd day for the entire 11 years I had been on COS 11. Maintenance had looked at it. Herrick had filed requisitions for a replacement. Nothing changed. Tivayan went into the recycler housing on a quiet afternoon 6 months after she arrived, spent 40 minutes with a circuit probe and a manual I did not know we had, and the recycler ran without stalling for the next 18 months. When I asked her what she had done, she said, "The resonance damper was installed at the wrong harmonic. I adjusted it." The resonance damper on a water recycler in a relay station kitchen. I let it go. There was also the incident with the Paleth freighter crew. This was about 8 months in. A group of Paleth merchant sailors came through the canteen drunk and loud, which was not unusual. Paleth merchants were always drunk and loud, and I had learned to keep the serving line moving and avoid eye contact. But one of them grabbed Karis, the other kitchen worker, by the wrist when she tried to clear his tray. He was laughing. Karis was not. Tivayan was at the back of the kitchen. She set down the tray she was drying, walked to the serving window, and spoke 3 words in a language I did not understand. The Paleth sailor let go of Karis, not slowly, the way a person lets go when they decide to cooperate. Instantly, the way a person lets go when the air in the room changes and something in the back of their brain fires a warning they cannot name. He let go and stepped back and did not look at Tivayan again. None of them did. They left the canteen without finishing their meals. Karis asked me later what Tivayan had said. I told her I did not know. I asked Tivayan. She was quiet for a long time. Then she said, "I told him the formal consequences of touching a member of a protected household." "Protected household?" I said. "It is a legal term," she said. "In some systems, I let it go. I let a lot of things go. I am aware of how that sounds now, but at the time it seemed like the right thing to do. She was entitled to her privacy. She did her work. She was good at it. Better than good, better than anyone who had ever held that job at cost 11, which I realize is not a high bar, but still. She kept the kitchen cleaner than I could manage. She reorganized the storage so efficiently that our waste index dropped by 1/3. She never missed a shift. She never asked for anything. And every morning I said, "Morning, Tivayan," and every evening I said, "Night, Tivayan," and I set her plate on the warmer shelf. She told me about the name thing 14 months in. We were closing the kitchen after the dinner shift. The station was quiet. Most of the transient berths were empty, which happened sometimes when the trade lanes shifted and the traffic routed through the northern corridor instead. It was just the 2 of us in the canteen, wiping down the surfaces, running the sanitizer over the prep station. The overhead lights were at half power the way they went after 2200. "Darren," she said. I looked up. She did not use my name often. She used it when she wanted me to listen. "In my culture," she said, "using a person's name is not casual." I waited. "It is a formal act," she said. "A recognition. When you speak someone's name, you are saying, 'I see you.' Not your function, not your rank, not the role you serve. You. The act of naming is the act of acknowledging that a person exists as themselves, apart from what they do. She paused. She was looking at the sanitizer in her hand as though it were something she had never seen before. "Most people do not do this," she said. "Most people use titles or designations or nothing at all. To use a name, to use it consistently, every day, without being asked, is a formal gesture. In my culture, it carries legal weight. It is an act of witness. It means that you have seen someone, and that your seeing them is not contingent on what they can do for you." I stood there with a rag in my hand and did not know what to say. "I did not know that," I said. My mother always used people's names." Tivian looked at me then. The look on her face was not an expression I had a word for. It was not gratitude, too steady for that. Not surprise, too old, as if she had already known what I would say and had heard it confirmed. Something quieter, something that had been there for a long time and was only now being allowed to surface. "Your mother," she said, "taught you something that empires have forgotten." She went back to cleaning the prep station. I went back to wiping the counter. We did not speak about it again, but I understood, after that something was different. Not between us, we were the same as we had always been. Coworkers. A man who ran a canteen and a woman who cleaned it. But the frame around it had shifted. I was doing something that meant more than I knew, and she was letting me do it without telling me what it cost her to receive it. I kept saying her name. I kept setting her plate aside. 19 months in, I noticed that she touched the inside of her left wrist sometimes. A small gesture, unconscious, the way a person touches a wedding ring or a scar. There was nothing visible on her wrist, no tattoo, no mark, no jewelry. But she touched it the way you touch something that used to be there. I did not ask. 22 months in, during a routine maintenance shutdown that knocked out the canteen's heating system for 3 days, I brought a thermal blanket from my quarters and left it on the chair where she ate her meals. She did not mention it. But the next morning, when I came in to start the breakfast prep, the blanket was folded precisely on the chair. Military corners, the kind I had seen in service footage, not the kind a kitchen worker learns, and on top of it was a small folded square of station paper. It said, "The act of warmth, freely given, is the foundation of every civilization I have known." I kept the note. It is in my quarters. I have it still. The Warfleet arrived on a Thursday. I remember that because Thursdays were inventory days, and I was in the cold store counting protein blocks when the station's proximity alert went off. COS 11's proximity alert was a sound I had heard maybe 4 times in 11 years. It meant something large had entered the station's sensor envelope. Not a freighter, not a cargo hauler, not a transit shuttle. Something with a military profile. I came out of the cold store and looked through the canteen's observation window. The window faced the approach lane, and through it I could see the station's exterior floodlights sweeping across something that was not supposed to be there. Ships, 5 of them, in formation, dark-hulled, sharp-angled, running lights in a configuration I had never seen. Not Verath, not Paleth, not any of the commercial or military silhouettes I had learned to recognize over 11 years of watching vessels dock at COS 11. They were large. Not freighter large, warship large. The kind of large that makes a relay station feel like a pebble sitting in the path of a river. Herrick came over the station intercom and told everyone to stay at their posts. His voice was doing the thing it did when he was afraid, but did not want anyone to know. Flat, overly precise, each word bitten off at the edges. I looked across the canteen for Tivian. She was standing at the serving window. She had been wiping down the counter when the alert sounded, and she was still holding the rag, but her hand had stopped. She was looking through the observation window at the ships, the way a person looks at something they have been expecting for a long time and have not yet decided whether to be glad about. She was not afraid. That was the thing I noticed first. Everyone else on the station was afraid. I could hear it in the corridor, footsteps moving too fast, voices pitched too high, the hum of people who did not know what was happening and feared the worst. But Tivayan stood at the window with the rag in her hand and her shoulders level, and her chin lifted exactly the way it had been on the day she walked into this canteen 2 years ago, and she was not afraid, she was deciding. I knew that the way you know things about someone you have worked beside for 2 years, not from evidence, not from logic, but from the accumulated weight of shared silence. I had seen her decide things before. Which tray to stack first, whether to speak or stay quiet, whether to tell me about the naming custom or keep it to herself. She made decisions the way she did everything else, completely, without visible deliberation, with the stillness of a person who has already weighed the options and is now only choosing the moment. She put the rag on the counter, folded it once, precisely, set it on the edge of the serving window the way she always did at the end of a shift, aligned with the counter's edge. Then she straightened, and the last small piece of disguise, the slight hunch of the shoulders, the downward tilt of the chin, the posture of a woman who cleaned kitchens for a living, fell away from her like a garment she had been wearing over her real clothes. The delegation came aboard 20 minutes later, 6 of them. They wore armor, formal, ceremonial, dark metal with deep crimson inlay and crests I did not recognize. The lead officer was tall, gray-skinned, wearing a sidearm that looked like it cost more than the entire station. He walked through the main corridor with the kind of authority that makes civilians flatten against the walls, and I watched from the canteen doorway as Herrick tried to intercept him and was spoken past as though he were furniture. They came to the canteen. The lead officer stepped through the entrance and stopped. His eyes moved across the room. The scratched tables, the stained ceiling panels, the serving window with its chipped counter and its hand-written menu board, and found Tivayan. She was still standing at the window. She had put the rag down. The officer looked at her for a long time. Then he dropped to one knee. The 5 soldiers behind him did the same, simultaneously, with a precision that made the floor vibrate. He spoke in the same language Tivayan had used on the Paleth sailor. I did not understand the words, but I understood the register. It was the register of a man who has been looking for something for a long time and has found it and is afraid he will say the wrong thing. Tivayan answered him. 3 sentences, quiet, measured. Her voice had changed. Not louder, it was the same volume she used when she told me the cold store inventory was done, but the texture of it was different. There was a weight to it that I had heard only once before, the day she spoke to the Paleth sailor, and I realized now that I had been hearing a reduced version of this woman for 2 years. What I had taken for quiet composure was not composure. It was restraint. She had been holding herself inside a smaller shape than the one she actually occupied, and now the edges of the real shape were showing. The officer spoke again. Longer this time. I caught one word that I recognized. Sarai. He said it twice. Tivan closed her eyes. Just for a moment. When she opened them, they were wet, but she was not crying. She was. I do not have the right word. She was allowing something to be true that she had been holding at arm's length. Her left hand moved to her right wrist, to the place she always touched, and she pressed her fingers there and held them. She said one word. The officer stood. Then she turned and walked around the serving counter, and for the first time in 2 years, she was on the other side of it, on the canteen floor, among the tables, in the room where transient freighter crews ate rehydrated protein and complained about the water pressure. She walked toward the delegation. Her posture had not changed, and everything about her had changed. She was the same woman who had scrubbed my grill trays that morning, and she was not that woman at all. She stopped 3 steps from the officer, then she turned to me. I was standing by the cold store door. I had not moved. I was holding a data pad with the protein inventory half entered, and I had forgotten it was in my hand. Darren, she said my name, in the register. The formal one, the one she had told me about, the one that carries legal weight, the one that means I see you. She said it the way the officer had said Sorai, with the same weight, the same precision, the same careful deliberateness of a person who knows that what they are saying will be recorded and remembered. Darren Cool, she said, keeper of my name. The words were in standard, but the register was not. The register was the formal one. I could hear it. The same cadence she had used on the Paleth sailor, the same weight she had used when she told me about naming, but fuller now, unrestrained, with a resonance I had never heard because she had never allowed it in the canteen. It filled the room. Not loud, present. The way a held note fills a chamber when the acoustics are right and the silence is deep enough to carry it. She looked at the officer. She spoke in their language, a full paragraph, measured each word placed. The officer listened without moving. When she finished, he looked at me. His expression shifted. Not deference exactly, something adjacent. The acknowledgement of a fact he had not expected, he inclined his head toward me. A small bow, not deep but formal. The soldiers behind him did the same. TVN looked at me again. I must go, she said. The court has been restored. There is work I left unfinished. I nodded. I did not know what else to do. I told them, she said, that for 2 years on this station, one man used my name every day, that he set a plate aside for me when no one asked him to, that he brought a blanket when the heating failed and did not require me to be grateful. I told them that in 2 years of exile, the only act of formal recognition I received came from a human who did not know what he was doing and did it anyway because his mother taught him to. She paused. In my culture, she said, that is not a small thing. It is entered in the record. It is permanent. I stood there with the data pad in my hand and the protein count half finished and the Warfleet visible through the observation window, 5 dark ships hanging against the stars like something from a story that was not mine. I just used your name, I said. Yes, she said. And the look on her face, the one I had seen 14 months ago when she told me about naming, the look I still did not have a word for, was there again, steady and old and quiet and full of something that I think might have been the closest her people come to what we would call grace. That is what I am telling them, she said. She walked to the canteen entrance. The delegation formed around her, not in front, behind. She was leading them. She had always been leading, I realized, even here, even with the rag and the grill trays and the badge, number 4 to 712. She had been leading things she had left, which was herself, and she had done it without complaint and without asking anyone to notice. At the entrance, she stopped. She did not turn all the way around. She turned her head just enough so that I could see her profile, the bronze-brown skin, the dark teal hair, the line of her jaw, the faint metallic light on her cheekbone from the overhead panels. "Morning, Darren," she said, and then she walked through the corridor toward the docking bay, and the soldiers followed, and the sound of their boots on the deck plating faded, and the canteen was empty, and I stood there behind the counter with a rag in my hand and a plate on the warmer shelf that no one was going to eat. I did not see her again for 4 months. The things that happened during those 4 months, not my story to tell. I learned some of it later, from news feeds and diplomatic dispatches that filtered down to the border stations, the restoration of the Sarai court, the formal trials of the coup architects, the re-establishment of trade accords that had been frozen during the 2 years of exile. I learned that the woman I had known as Tivayan was Tivayan Reth Sarai, Empress of the Reth Sarai Ascendancy, sovereign of 11 systems and 400 billion people. I learned that the coup had been led by her own advisory council, that she had escaped alone, that the loyalist faction had spent 2 years fighting to restore her while she scrubbed grilled trays on a relay station in the middle of nowhere. I learned that she had chosen COS 11 specifically because it was the kind of place no one would ever look. I also learned, from a passing mention in a diplomatic brief that Herrick shared with me, because he did not know what else to do with it, that the Reth Sarai Ascendancy had been searching every station, outpost, and settlement on 17 transit corridors for 2 years. They had checked military installations, diplomatic safe houses, refugee processing centers, allied courts. They had not checked relay station kitchens. They had not considered the possibility that their Empress would scrub grill trays under a 4-digit badge number and eat standing at a window and say nothing. No one looks for an Empress behind a serving counter. That was the point. That was always the point. I kept running the canteen. There was nothing else to do. The protein still needed portioning. The fryer grate still needed cleaning. The water recycler still stalled every 3rd day. I hired a new kitchen worker, a young Verath man named Ossic, who was fine. He was not Tivayan. I still set a plate aside on the warmer shelf, sometimes, not every day. But sometimes I would reach for the tray and portion an extra serving and set it behind the fryer station before I realized what I was doing, and then I would stand there looking at it and feel something I could not name, and eat it myself rather than waste the food. The official document arrived 3 months after she left. It came through the station's administrative channel, flagged with a diplomatic priority seal that made Herrick nearly choke on his morning ration. It was short, 2 paragraphs, written in formal Reth Sarai legal language with a human translation appended. It designated me, Darren Cool, badge 2201, relay station COS 11, as Veltavan of the Reth Sarai Ascendancy. The translation said the term meant, approximately, the one who held the name. It was a formal title. It carried diplomatic standing. It meant that in any Reth Sarai system, in any court, in any chamber, I was recognized. Not as an ambassador, not as a dignitary, as a person who had performed an act of witness and whose act had been witnessed in return. The second paragraph said that the designation had been entered into the permanent record of the Sarai court by the Empress herself, and that the entry included the following annotation translated from the formal register. He did not know what he was doing. He did it every day. That is the definition of the thing we have been trying to teach ourselves for 10,000 years. I read the annotation 3 times. I read it standing at the serving window, in the spot where she used to eat her meals. The station was quiet. The overhead lights were at half power. Through the observation window, the stars looked the same as they always did, small and far away and indifferent to the things that happen on relay stations in the middle of nowhere. My hands were shaking, not from fear, not from excitement, from the weight of understanding, arriving late, arriving all at once, that the small thing I had done every day, the name, the plate, the blanket, had been received by a woman who ruled 11 systems as the most significant act of recognition she had experienced in 2 years of exile, that in a galaxy of courts and titles and diplomatic protocols, the thing that mattered was a canteen operator who said her name because his mother taught him to. I folded the document and put it in my pocket and went back to the fryer grate. There was nothing else to do. The protein still needed portioning. The station still needed feeding. And I had learned, from a woman who cleaned tables for 2 years without complaint, that dignity is not a grand gesture. It is the thing you do every day, whether anyone notices or not. 4 months after she left, a ship docked at COS 11. Not a warship, a small diplomatic courier, sleek, dark-hulled, running the Sarai crest on its port side. A single officer came aboard and delivered a package to the canteen. Inside was a thermal blanket, not the station-issue one I had given her, but something finer, woven from a material I did not recognize. Deep bronze with a dark teal thread running through it. There was a note. It said, "Morning, Darren." I put the blanket on the chair where she used to sit. I have not moved it. Some mornings, when the canteen is empty and the lights are at half power and I am setting out the trays for the breakfast line, I say it out loud. Not to anyone, just to the room, to the counter, to the chair with the blanket folded on it in military corners. Morning, Tivayan. It is a formal act. It carries weight. I did not know that when I started. I know it now. And I do it anyway, because my mother taught me to use a person's name, and because somewhere across 11 systems, an Empress entered mine in a record that will outlast this station and the stars it orbits. I am a canteen operator on a relay station. I am not the kind of man things happen to. But I said her name, and she said mine. And that, apparently, is how civilizations remember the things that matter.